Hey guys, Jesse Newell here. Blair, Kerkhoff, and I on this episode are going to talk about the FBI investigation into college basketball and what it means for KU moving forward in the weeks to come after the federal trial here ends up in New York State. Also, a side note, I did not plug in my microphone until about 2 minutes in, so my voice will sound weird to start and good to finish. So just a warning as that's coming, and enjoy the episode. Blair, how you doing?
Doing great, Jesse. Hope you're doing all right.
Yeah, doing well, and we're going to spend most of the time here on today's podcast, if not all of it, discussing just the latest that has come out from the federal court case involving Adidas and I guess also KU when it comes to some of the allegations and things that have come about. A very busy week when it comes to that, and if you haven't been briefed on this or haven't been able to sift through everything, we put up a timeline on the Kansas City Star website that can kind of summarize everything. If you give it about a 2.5 minute read, you can kind of get caught up. But I would say the most important things that have come out, that there have been some text messages between Bill Self and TJ Gassnola, who is an Adidas consultant, kind of a bag man as they call him, somebody who delivers money, and did make payments to both Billy Preston and Sylvia DeSousa's guardian, as he claims. Or Billy Preston's mother and Sylvia Sosa's guardian. Some text between Bill Self and him, and then text between Curtis Townsend and him, and then also later on a wiretap phone call between Curtis Townsend and Merle Code, another Adidas consultant type figure, where they discuss Zion Williamson and what it would take to get him to come to Kansas, where it appears to be that Curtis Townsend had knowledge of Adidas trying to make payments to get Zion Williamson to Kansas. So that's all kind of a very short, condensed version of what we've learned this week. I guess I want to go big picture like we normally do, Blair. And what do you think this all means in the grand scheme of the NCAA? And what do you think this all means, especially for Kansas, as they try to move forward and navigate some new waters here?
Well, as we have tried to say all along, as far as the FBI, the federal investigation is concerned, there's nothing there to for Kansas, for Bill Self, for Curtis Townsend, for anybody who's been named in this to be concerned about it. Those who are directly involved in college basketball who are concerned are the assistant coaches for the other programs that were arrested, whose conversations were wiretapped, recorded. Chuck Person from Auburn and the Oklahoma State assistant, a couple others whose trials are scheduled for later. That wasn't the case for anybody involved with Kansas. To me, the bigger question is once, if and when the NCAA gets involved, what happens? And nobody knows the answer. Nobody knows the answer to either of those, the if and the when. My guess is it'll be a matter of time before the NCAA gets involved. And everything that I read in the timeline that you put together last night, suggests that NCAA violations occurred, major violations occurred. If true, and of course, these are, or at least are alleged to have occurred, and then my guess is there'll be a letter of inquiry, and then you begin the NCAA investigation process. The FBI investigation, how much of that gets turned over to the NCAA? Do they turn over all of it? Is that admissible for the NCAA? I'm guessing that it is, and then it goes from there. Then it becomes an NCAA issue, and that's the bigger concern for Kansas if and when it becomes an NCAA issue. And we don't know the when part of that. Meanwhile, a college basketball season is we're on the doorstep, right? All Big 12 preseason team announced on Wednesday this week, and polls are coming out, and much expectation for the Kansas basketball program, but they begin this season in such a odd place, with the excitement of a team that looks ready to compete with anybody nationally, but with the events and the conversations in New York, casting a cloud over everything about Kansas basketball.
Yeah, and just to be clear too, we're talking right now on Thursday afternoon. So if anything else comes out in these closing arguments on Thursday or a verdict, all those things that it's before we talk. Blair, I think I see this in kind of two different ways when you're looking at this from KU's standpoint. Okay, we talk about the NCAA part of this, and it seems like, as you've reported before, that Mark Emmert and the NCAA have basically been told to stand down on this until all the trials, all of the investigation from the FBI is over with. And if that's the case, this is probably a matter of not weeks or months, probably a matter of years before any of this stuff would be in the NCAA's hands where they could go back and do some things. And not only that, I thought Dan Wetzel made a pretty good point from Yahoo Sports a couple days ago, which is, okay, if you have Curtis Townsend appearing to talk to an Adidas representative about what it's going to take to get Zion Williamson on campus, and KU ends up not getting him, and Duke gets him, is the NCAA going to want to go down the rabbit hole that is Curtis Townsend in Kansas and then follow it down to Duke, where you might have to follow down another rabbit hole, which is, while you're investigating Duke, why don't you go investigate this school and this school? And all of a sudden, the teams that are making you money, the teams that are the ones that people watch the most, are the ones that you're trying to take down. And through this whole time, it seems the NCAA has kind of been okay with putting their head in the sand and nothing's happening here, while kind of raking in the money. So how much will they want to pursue these sorts of violations, even if, like you said, if you look at this timeline and look at it and say, hey, I think that this might be an NCAA violation, this one might be one, all those sorts of things, how much will the NCAA pursue this, especially if it's a couple years down the line? And that takes me to my second point, which is Kansas. So there's all this on Kansas, and they're going. If nothing else, it's a bad look. I mean, it's a very bad look for Kansas. They've been in the national spotlight for this for the better part of this last week, and these headlines are not positive, obviously. But for Kansas, you probably want to spin the conversation forward and have some sort of closing to this, so that this is not a conversation that happens for the rest of the year about this whole thing. And so what they do in this, I think, is just as interesting, because how do they try to spin this forward, even if they plan to not take very much action when it comes to Silvio De Sousa or Curtis Townsend? I mean, do you suspend Townsend for a couple games, and then that way the conversation is like, well, he served his suspension and you move him on? Or if you give him a suspension, are you admitting a little bit of guilt there? Do you just not give him a suspension at all and basically dare the NCAA to say, hey, you think you've got something? Go ahead. Let's see what it is. Same thing for Silvio De Sousa. TJ Gasnola testified that he gave De Sousa's guardian $2,500. If you're Kansas, do you consider talking to Silvio and Fenny Falmain, the guardian, and just say, hey, look, let's self-submit to the NCAA this $2,500. Let's have them give the punishment. And if we look at precedent over past years, Josh Selby took $5,000, paid it back, got a 9-game suspension. Darnell Jackson took $5,000, gave it back, got a 9-game suspension. For Silvio, if you self-report this to the NCAA and they make a ruling, you're probably looking at maybe 5 or 6 games, something like that. And then once he gets on the court, the first conversation in every TV broadcast isn't that, hey, KU is playing him despite all this controversy surrounding him. The conversation is, hey, they self-submitted this to the NCAA. He served his punishment, and now he's still playing for Kansas. So, to me, this is kind of the fascinating part. We haven't heard from Kansas yet. We haven't heard from Jeff Long. We haven't heard publicly from Bill Self. We haven't heard from Chancellor Douglas Girod. But I am fascinated to kind of see how they decide to move forward when all this bad publicity surrounds them, yet they probably want to try, with the season coming up and with them being the likely number one team, to spin this forward so that it's not bad publicity anymore, or at least that people can move on from that when they're having their conversations about KU basketball.
Hey, it's Blair Kerkhoff, and if you're listening to this, you love Kansas City sports, whether it's the Chiefs, Royals, Sporting, Mizzou, KU, or K-State. And no one covers these teams like the Kansas City Star. If you currently subscribe to the paper or have a digital subscription, thank you for your support. And if you don't, here's a great offer. It's called Sports Pass, unlimited digital access to every sports story and video on kansascity.com. And it's just $30 for the first year. It's the best sports value in town, just 8 cents a day or $2.50 a month. You can't beat that. Subscribe now at kansascity.com/sportspass. I think without taking some kind of action, if it's just, status quo, business as usual, nothing to see here, Kansas, I think that's a bad look. I think that it's ignoring what's out there and the conversation about what's out there. And I agree with you, Jesse. I think Kansas would be smart to take some kind of action in a way that you have expressed. And you're right. It's happened before. And once the suspension was over with, the story was pretty much over with, and that would not be the case here because of the timeline and because of the way the wheels grind, and in these matters, it is going to go on forever. But at least it would show that Kansas was paying attention and needs to do something about this. Or at least shows that it did pay attention, and I think that would be a good thing to have had happen for Kansas. Now, to your first point, I think one of the more fascinating revelations in terms of conversations between bagmen and coaches was the one between I think it was Gasnola and Bill Self when they were talking about I believe it was Silvio, and it did mention other schools. This is how Duke, UNC do it, and Kentucky too, right?
Yeah, just to be clear, it was the text message. They were talking about the extension, the planned extension that KU had signed with Adidas. That was 12 years, and so Gasnola was thanking Self for that, and then they went on and went to discuss. Hey, that Bill Self said that's how it works at UNC, because Gasnola had said, hey, I feel like Adidas should take care of Bill Self in Kansas, number one. That should be the most important thing. And Bill basically responded and said that's how it works at Duke and Carolina or whatever it was.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's a good clarification. And again, and to address another point that you made on the timeline factor, the first assistant. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the first assistant coach hasn't gone to trial yet. That I don't believe that occurs until February.
Correct. Correct.
Well, I think that's right. So, we're going to be, talking, we'll be heavily into bracketology when the first of the assistant coaches, stands trial here, and who knows what's going to be heard from an assistant coach who's been arrested, who is likely going to cooperate with federal authorities, and we'll get a lot more information about what goes on in college basketball. And to circle back, to another point that you made earlier, that to have an impact on the glamour programs, the impact of college basketball when this kind of news has an effect on the glamour programs, the money-making programs for not only for college basketball, but for the NCAA and the popularity of the NCAA tournament. I do think about what the NCAA and Mark Emmert's move is going to be, beyond the formation of the Rice Commission, the Condoleezza Rice Commission that suggested, some changes, including, having earlier and more often, allowing athletes to have these conversations with agents earlier in their careers, having USA Basketball, a national organization, have a much greater influence on the grassroots level of amateur basketball. I think there were some good ideas expressed there, but I really don't think anything that I heard recommended by the changes by the Rice Commission is going to end this. What's been revealed in the New York courtroom here in the last few weeks. So I think there's a time of reckoning approaching for college basketball and for the NCAA and how it wants to handle this. And does it redefine itself? Does it redefine amateurism? And don't for a minute think this doesn't happen in football. It absolutely happens in football, where with grassroots level football now, agents and runners are involved, and consultants are involved, and shoe companies are involved, and it absolutely happens in those two sports, in men's basketball and in football. It's just that at the moment we're talking KU and we're talking college basketball. So it's I think we're maybe at the doorstep of an evolution or that evolutionary change in the way that amateur basketball is administered. Is maybe maybe go so far as changing the definition of amateur or eliminating the idea of the amateur. And another piece of news that occurred today, in addition to the closing arguments in New York, was the G League. The NBA's minor league announced today that it's going to make itself available for the 18-year-old, the non one and done player, or the player that doesn't want to become a one and done in college basketball, but wants to get paid right away, and they're going to have a specific amount of $125,000 a year contracts for some of these kind of top prospects, so they don't have to go to college. And of course, that's another supposedly another remedy to the black market economy of college basketball.
Yeah, Detzman had an interesting article this week, but I don't know if you got to check it out, but exactly talking to what you spoke to, which is the NCAA's definition of amateurism and how it's changed over time. And the argument has kind of always been that if you pay these players to play, that the interest in these games and these teams and these athletes will go down. And over time, as that amateurism has changed from just room and board and laundry money to room and board and now a stipend, the interest and level and everything has not changed. In fact, it's only increased with college athletics. So I think you're right. We're at a breaking point with that is probably going to have to be changed, that this is going to have to become more of a professional league, and it doesn't appear that the fan bases, maybe you lose some people, and I think I've heard from enough KU fans out there that really didn't know that a lot of this stuff was going on, or at least chose to not believe that it was, or hope to turn the other way, or hope that that KU was a program that did not have to use some of these methods that are alleged to have to get athletes. But I think as that's gone on, it there might be some frustration among KU fans, or some people just let down that this sort of thing happens. But KU's best defense in all this, as we've mentioned, is just that this is, I think I've heard the term, this is the price to play poker. This is what happens at the top level of college basketball. And while KU continues to be in the headlines because they are the ones with the evidence that are coming up in this federal court case, their best defense is basically looking around and saying, hey, maybe, but this is kind of how the system works, and it's an unjust system because of what the NCAA set up. So that might change things, as you said, at the NCAA level, which could perhaps help things with the game, so that these type of activities, or at least receiving some sort of money for kids that need that, or families that need that, will be less of an illegal activity and more of something that can be provided, given how much money that these kids bring to their schools.
Well, and maybe more information will be revealed as the trials unfold over 2019 and maybe beyond, and other programs will be implicated. I agree with the thought that Adidas isn't the only, not the only program or the only shoe company doing this or involved with this, and the Zion Williamson case is probably going to reveal that to be true. He ended up going to a different shoe company sponsored university. I imagine, I won't say that there was a bidding war for him. All we know was the what was said at the trial was that, do what it takes to get him. And that still didn't work for Kansas in this case. So he ends up at Duke. And so I'll let others draw their own conclusions there. So, but it is it's a sad time. It really is. And, but it's a sad time because, especially where we are, because the importance of Kansas basketball to the fans of that program. It means so much to those that follow KU. And I know that you said it a moment ago. I think there are probably a lot of fans hurt by this and angry, upset, and I'll be curious to see how they react, what their reaction is to all this, because it's still all pretty fresh. The courtroom, the testimony, and I don't know if we've gauged fan interest or really the public. We've seen some national media people chime in, but I just wonder how the Kansas rank and file fans feel about this and what their emotions are during all this.
Yeah, I think many of the vocal ones are people that maybe had an understanding of it, but I think there are, you get the wide range, the wide spectrum. You get the super rabid, buy all the recruiting website stuff fans, and then you get, hey, the grandmother, the 85-year-old grandmother who watches the games with you, or she calls her grandson in to watch every single basketball game. That's what they share together. Those sorts of things. It's like I don't think 85-year-old grandmother is in tune to the black ops nature of the Adidas thing. So for KU to kind of be
right.
continue to be brought up in this sort of thing, and to maybe have this more out there than it was in the past, that's obviously not a positive thing for KU. And as I've said before, I think more than anything right now for Kansas, this is just a bad look. I mean, there's really no way to get around it. It's bad publicity. It's been bad publicity for day after day after day, and they've kind of gotten roped into this thing as collateral damage because they are not a party in this right now. Like it's the government versus the defense, but KU doesn't have any lawyers at the table, if that makes any sense.
But you're right.
But for Kansas, it's just I will be interested, because if you know Bill Self and how he's handled things in the past, I still remember like when the basketball team and the football team got in a fight on campus. And you'll remember this from back in the day, Blair. It was a day or two later.
Oh yeah.
And Bill Self came out in front of cameras and talked about it. And he brought Tyshawn Taylor, and he brought a couple other players, and they talked about it. Bill Self understands how this works. I mean, the quicker usually that you get out in front of these things, the better it is for you publicity-wise. And so KU for now has waited till this trial has ended, and I think that's probably a call from the actual university and not just KU Athletics. You know what I mean? I think that's a call because they don't want to get in the way of any court proceedings, that sort of thing. But he's going to be available on Wednesday at Big 12 Media Day. And obviously players will be, were available last week at Media Day, and will be available coming up here soon. But I'm just interested to see how KU, new athletic director Jeff Long, and Chancellor Douglas Gerard handle this whole thing, because it is in their best interest to try to get people to think ahead or think toward the future without them worrying or moaning or bemoaning what has happened here over this court case and what's happened in the past. So I don't know how you spin that forward. And then, as you said, Blair, does Kansas have to do something to show that, hey, they are disappointed in this? They do not like that these allegations are out there. Is there something that is just even symbolic that shows, hey, this has to come down, or this has to be a punishment, because this is not acceptable at Kansas. Even if other people are doing it, this is not something that should be going on at KU. Will that sort of thing happen? I don't know, but those are the things I'm fascinated by, and those are the things I think we're going to learn here in the next couple weeks.
Well, and it's to me, what's interesting is, as you say, this case was obviously about Kansas, but Kansas wasn't directly involved with that, with a voice at the table. So Kansas, I think they're going to get asked about it. They're going to have to address it, speak to it, but it really does put Kansas in a very awkward position.
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
by they're going to have to, I think we expect them to acknowledge something that they have never talked about. And,
Yes.
And so that'll make any kind of media opportunities fascinating, and can't miss media coverage when Kansas speaks to the media.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. Like you said, basketball season's coming up. Games start a week from today, and KU is likely to be number one. So not only will KU be a big story because of all of this federal trial and the Adidas and all the evidence that's come out, but they'll also be a huge story because they're going to be a pretty doggone good basketball team as well. And a lot of people are talking about them for that reason, too. Well, we're going to wrap it up, Blair. For Blair Kerkhoff, this is Jesse Newell. Thanks for checking out the Sports Beat KC podcast. Be sure to tune in for another episode next week.